the end of the portion of Sisa, we learn about a very intriguing episode. Moshe Rabbeinu is coming down from the mountain with the second set of tablets. After he smashed and broke the first set of tablets, when the Jews created a golden calf, and he goes up on the mountain and he beseeches God for forgiveness, and he's finally descending Sinai with a new set of tablets. And at this moment, there is a metamorphosis, a transformation in Moses' face. Bring up source number 1 in your curriculum right below the video. The Torah says, Vayihi beredes Moshe mehar Sinai ushnei luchos ha'edus biyad Moshe. As Moses is coming down from Mount Sinai and the 2 tablets of the testimony of the 10 commandments are in his hand. Beriditay min ahar, when he's coming down from the mountain. U'Moshe lo yada ki karan oir panav bedabre itay. But Moshe did not know that the skin of his face was karan, and we're going to explain what that means in a moment. The skin of his face was karan while God was talking to him. Moses is unaware of this change in the skin of his face. What was the change? Karan. Now, interestingly, some of the non-Jewish translators of the Bible, a Greek translator, a Latin translator, understood Karan as having the same meaning as the Hebrew word keren, which means a horn. Hence, they explained the verse that Moses grew horns on his face. In fact, Christian commentators of the Bible throughout the Middle Ages commonly made this mistake, including Michelangelo in his famous, brilliant marble sculpture of Moses, 16th century. You could take a look at the image. He depicts Moses with horns on the top. Why did Michelangelo decide that Moses has horns? It was based on the erroneous translation of Korah. Already the Rashbam was a grandson of Rashi who lived in France in the 13th century. He wrote a lovely commentary on Chumash, and he points out this mistake. The Rashbam in the 1200 says that there are those who are translating Koran as in the word keren, which is a horn in the Chumash, in the Bible. And yet it's einei ela shtus, he says. It's foolish, it's a mistake. By the way, I was reading the commentary of Nechama Leibowitz on Chumash, and I saw that she quoted this Rashbam a little differently. She says the Rashbam says whoever says that Koran means a horn is a shaita. But I see the Rashbam that's printed, he says it's a shtus. He doesn't take it personal that you're a fool. He just says it's a foolish translation. There are many Hebrew words that have exactly the same letters, but they mean different things. Like Koran, Kof, Reish, Nun, he says it doesn't mean a horn. They may be connected, which is why they have the same letters, but yet the literal meaning is different. So it's not horns. Moses didn't come down with 2 horns on his face or on his head. There was another translation, another explanation, which is vehemently rejected by Rabbeinu Avram Eben Ezra. Eben Ezra lived in the 1100s in Spain, and he also wrote a commentary on the Bible, on the Torah. He was a great philosopher, commentator, poet, and scholar. And he quotes an explanation given by a Jew. This is not by a non-Jew, this is by a Jew who lived in Afghanistan. His name was Chivi. And the 2 great Jewish philosophers, Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon, who lives in the 10th century, and the Eben Ezra, Rabbeinu Avram Eben Ezra, who lives in the 12th century, often in their writings take on the position of this Jew, Chivi, who was a heretic and who used to scoff and undermine some fundamental teachings of the Torah and of Judaism. So, for example, here, Chivi has to say this, that Moses hasn't eaten for 40 days. So his face became so dried out, He looked like a horn which is dry and lifeless and dead. That's what Moses looked like. And that's what the Torah is trying to say. Moses didn't realize that he was so dried out, looked like a horn, the horn of an animal. The Ibn Ezra rejects it, is extremely upset at Chivi for this interpretation. He says, number one, why were the Jews scared of approaching Moses? In the Ibn Ezra's words, who never saw a dead person? In his days, that was certainly a question. Who never saw a dead person, and who's scared of seeing a dead person? Why are they scared of approaching Moses? So his face looks dead. Second, why did he ever take off his mask? It says Moses put on his mask but then took it off when he spoke to the Jewish people. Why did he take it off? And the third is, the Torah says later, at the end of his life, he's 120 years old. His face and his eyes retain the same youthful vibrancy and freshness. The Torah wouldn't contradict itself. Here he's much younger, he's 80 years old, 80 and change. There he's 120, 40 years later. So what is the meaning of the verse? So all of our commentators famously translate Karan Arpnei Moshe, that the skin of Moses' face assumed a special brightness, light, glow, and illumination. That's how we have to understand the verse. Rashi even explains the connection with horns. The lasers, the beams of light that were glowing from his face looked like horns. That's the connection. There was a special glow on Moses' face. Now here, there is a very simple but important question that's pointed out by the Ur HaChaim. The Ur HaChaim was another great commentator on the Bible much later years. The Ur HaChaim lived in the 1700s, late 1600s and early 1700s. He passed away in the Holy Land in 1740, Tovkuf. And the Ur HaChaim points out a gewaldige question, great question, Rabbeinu Chaim ben Otter. He says that the way the Torah describes the story seems very illogical. First, describe the episode, and then give me details about the episode. If you take a look again at source number one, bring up again source number one, the Torah says Moses comes down from Mount Sinai with 2 tablets. And Moses did not know that his face was glowing as God spoke to him. Why don't you first tell us that Moses' face assumed a unique glow, and then tell us that he was unaware of it? The way we find out about the glow on Moshe's face is while the Torah is telling us that he was unaware of it. That seems like a very interesting, intriguing, and strange way of telling a story. Say Moses came down, his face was glowing, special glow grew on his face, and he didn't know about it. Granted. Doesn't say that Moses came down and he did not know that his face was glowing. First, he didn't know. We don't even know the story, and we already know that he didn't know the story. First tell me the story, and then tell me that he doesn't know the story. Don't tell me he didn't know the story which we never heard about. That's the Ur HaChaim's question. Now there's a fascinating medrash. There's a fascinating rabbinic tradition in midrash on this verse. Please bring up source number 2. In your curriculum is right below the video. Says the Medrash Rabbi in Parshas Sisa. It's also in Medrash Tanchuma. Umeheicha notal Moshe karnei ahoit. The Medrash says, from where did Moses get these beams of glory? And the Medrash brings 3 opinions, but I want to quote one. Rabbi Yehuda bar Nachman b'shem Reb Shimon ben Levi Yomer. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Nachman in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, said, Atsha hayakosev bekulmus nishtayer kima. As Moses was writing the Torah scroll with a pen, with a quill, some ink remained in his pen. And Moses took this ink that was left in the quill and he smeared it on his head. And from this ink, the beams of radiance were created on Moses' face. Let's understand this medrash. First of all, what does it mean? He's writing the Torah with a quill, and some extra ink remains. And supposedly he doesn't have what to do with this ink. Why? Because he doesn't need any more ink for the Torah scroll. Why doesn't he need any more ink? Because everything is complete. So he has a little ink extra remaining in the quill that's not being used for the writing of the Torah. So what do you do with the ink? He puts it on his head, and he receives this extraordinary glory. But why was there extra ink? It seems like almost blasphemous. Did God not know how many words and letters he wants to have in his Torah scroll, and therefore he miscalculated the amount of ink he has to put into Moses' quill when he's writing the Torah? Why was there ink left over? The Or HaChaim again, here, gives a very interesting interpretation. He says, to understand this, you have to look later. In the book of Numbers, the portion of Bahaloischa. Moses there has a verse. Moses, the man, was more humble than every human being on the face of this earth. And when he was writing, when he was taking dictation from God, and writing the Torah scroll, writing the Torah, Moses, the humble man, felt very uncomfortable to write this about himself. Moses is the humblest man in the world. Because he was so humble, he didn't want to write it. Once heard for the Lubavitcher Rebbe once shared a story that there was a rabbi who was in court, and he was giving testimony. And at some point, the rabbi said something about himself which seemed very boastful. So the judge turned to him and said, "Rabbi, you're such a distinguished rabbi. Where is the humility?" And he said, and I'm going to quote the Lubavitcher Rebbe who said it in a Russian accent, he said, "Your honor, what should I do? I am under oath. I am under oath. I have to say the truth." So Moses writes, he's the humblest man, but he didn't feel comfortable. So you'll take a look in Ba'aloischa, Onav is written without a Yud. He wrote Onav, which means humble, Ayin Nun Vav, missing the Yud. This was the extra ink that was left in the quill, Zakadar Achayim. This was the little ink that was left behind. The Yud of Onav remained in the quill. He didn't want to write it. And it's from that humility that Moses experienced this great glow. Now, it's a beautiful ethical idea which tells us about humility versus arrogance in a lovely poetic expression in the Midrash, in the Song of Songs quoted in the Or HaChaim. What wisdom turned into its crown, humility uses as its heel. It says, Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. The crown, the genesis of wisdom is fear of God. Ekev Anova Yiras Hashem, the heel of humility is fear of God. For what wisdom, that which is a crown for wisdom is only a heel for humility. This tells us what humility is. The importance to be humble. The growth that occurs when you're a humble person. When you can accept criticism. When you can challenge yourself. When you can be open-minded and objective about yourself. When you don't let your ego get the better of you and blind your judgment, your perspective, your clarity. When you can be vulnerable and experience genuine relationships with people. When you don't become your own worst enemy. It's this unique humility of Moses which gave him this extraordinary glow. This, according to the Or HaChaim, is the meaning in the Medrash about the ink that was left over in the quill. The Baal HaTurim, Rabbeinu Yaakov Baal HaTurim, has another interpretation, but not very different. He says it has to do with another word, Vayikra El Moshe. The first word of Leviticus, Vayikra. Take a look, Vayikra has a small aleph. in a Torah scroll. It has a small aleph, an aleph ze'era. And the Baal HaTurim says Moses wanted to write the word Vayikra without an aleph. He wanted to write Vayikar el Moshe. God chanced upon Moses. As the Torah says in Bolog, Vayikar Hashem el Bilam. God chanced upon Bilam. In other words, it wasn't that God summoned Moses. Moses was too uncomfortable to write that. He happened to talk to me. Hashem told Moses, no, Vayikra. I called out to you. Don't write Vayikar. So Moses made the aleph small. He made the aleph small. For a small aleph, you don't need the same amount of ink as for a large aleph, or for a regular aleph. This was the ink that remained in the quill, the leftovers of the aleph of Vayikra, which again represented Moses' humility. Now, these are both lovely interpretations, obviously, but they still beg the simple question. These stories happened later. Moses is now coming down from Mount Sinai with the second set of tablets after the creation of the golden calf. The story of Vayikra, and especially Bahaloscha, happened later. If they happened later, so how did this glow occur now when Moses did not write those stories because it didn't happen yet? So this evening, I want to present another possible interpretation. But as we shall see, the two interpretations are not completely separate and independent, but like all Torah interpretations, they are deeply interconnected with each other. I want to first ask a basic question. The Medrash states this dilemma. Mehechan zacha Moshe lekarnei ahod. Whence did Moses merit the beams of glory? What type of question is this? The verse says where he merited from, why he merited these rays of glory. The verse says, Moses did not know that the skin of his face became bright, when God spoke to him. God spoke to him, and as a result of God speaking to Moses, his face changed. His countenance was transformed. That's what the verse, the Torah says. Why is the Medrash asking a question? Where did Moses merit this glow? The Torah says where he merited from. God spoke to him. If God would speak to you, perhaps you would also have this glow. The meaning in the Medrash must be understood in a far deeper fashion. The Medrash is asking a deeper question. Is this the first time God spoke to Moses? Is this the first time Moses was coming down with 2 tablets? Let's remember, these are the second set of tablets. What was perturbing the rabbis in the Midrash is why did Moshe Rabbeinu not experience this extraordinary glow and brightness when he came down the mountain the first time? Let's remember the story. On the 6th day of Sivan, on Mount Sinai, God communicates the 10 commandments to the Jewish people. Moses is on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. He comes down with the first set of tablets engraved, horn created by God himself, haluchos, ma'aseh Elokim hema, michtav Elokim hu. We read in Sisa, the tablets were the handwork of God. He sees the calf, the golden calf that the Jews created as a deity. He smashes the tablets. He goes up to the mountain again and he beseeches God once again for 40 days and 40 nights. And then for another 40 days and 40 nights. Until he finally secures God's complete forgiveness of the great betrayal of the Jewish people merely 40 days after the revelation at Sinai. And now the Torah is describing how Moses is coming down yet once again with the second set of tablets, which were not as sacred as the first set of tablets, because the first set of tablets were sculptured by God himself. The second set of tablets, God says, you must hoe them out. You must create and carve out these tablets. I will then engrave on them the 10 communications, the 10 instructions. So the second set of tablets, from a spiritual point of view, were inferior to the first set of tablets. This is what's bothering the Medrash. Why did Moses have this glow only now? When he came down the first time with the first set of tablets, that's when we should have expected that Moses' face would be illuminated with a special light and ray, radiance. But no, the first time nothing happened. Now only with the second tablets, which are inferior to the first tablets, now suddenly Karan Ur Pnei Moshe. Why? That's the question of the Medrash. On this the Medrash answers, because there was ink which was left over in the quill. And it's this ink that created this glow. What does this mean? Every Torah scroll, if you ever saw a Sefer Torah, Torah scroll, you could take a look at the image of a Torah scroll, we have here also in our video, has two components. You have the letters, the ink, letters which are written by a scribe with a quill using ink, and then you have the actual parchment, known as the gvil. The halacha tells us, Jewish law dictates, if you have a letter in the Torah scroll which is not surrounded from all four sides by parchment, the Torah scroll is not kosher. If two letters are connected, the ink of letter 1 is connected with the ink of letter 2, and there is no separation, there is no gvil, there's no empty parchment between them, it's not a kosher Torah. So you have two components. You have the actual letters, and you have the actual parchment. And it's so important, this. It's not just this parchment on top of the page you see in the Torah scroll, on the bottom of the page, and in between words, but also in between letters. Every letter must have parchment encircling it completely from all four sides. That's the story of a Torah scroll. What does this represent on a more spiritual, mystical level? So the Kabbalistic teachings, Hasidic teachings explain that there are two types of energy. There's Ur Pnimi and Ur Makif. Ur Pnimi is an energy that is internalized within the consciousness of the person. Ur Makif is a far more intense, pristine, and powerful energy which encircles the person. It encompasses the person, but it is too intense and powerful to be able to be assimilated and integrated within the parameters of the human consciousness. We all know this in our own life. Let's give an example of our own life. In our own lives, there are parts of ourselves, of our identity, that you will call your Ur Pnimi, the personality that you're aware of, the personality that you're intimate with, the personality that you're comfortable with, or that you struggle with, but it's a part of you that you understand, and some level you're aware of it, you're conscious of it. But every person also has what's called an Ur Makif, a superconscious energy. You may want to call it a subconscious energy. I think superconscious is better. What the Kabbalists call the Keser, the crown, above the Chachma, above the wisdom. This is the Urn Mock, a much deeper, more intense level of consciousness that sometimes the person is unaware of. And sometimes it takes years until rays of that super consciousness trickles down into the consciousness and you actually become aware of it. There are people who don't know some things about themselves for many years, for many decades, for a lifetime. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's just part of their makif. Sometimes it's too intense, it's too powerful, it's too scary, it's too forceful for them to be able to acknowledge it, for them to be able to embrace it, for them to be able to make peace with it. So it remains makif, it hovers around them, metaphorically speaking, in the sense they can't feel it, they can't sense it. But once in a while, and sometimes, it trickles down, or a part of it trickles down, and you become aware of certain things about who you are that you never knew. Zois HaTorah Adam, Torah is like a person is like a Torah. Torah has also these two elements. The letters of the Torah is the wisdom of Torah that's articulated within structured letters, words that make up sentences, paragraphs, chapters. A letter, a few letters become a word becomes a sentence, sentences become a verse. Verses make up a chapter, chapters make up books, and you have the Torah. That's the wisdom of Torah that's articulated within the letters. But then there's another part of Torah, and this is the gevil, the white blank parchment of the Torah. Every letter must be encircled from all sides by this parchment. Why? What is the big deal if a letter is not encircled completely by the parchment? And the answer is because every single letter has what's called an Urn Mock. There's an energy, there's a depth that encircles the letter that is too deep. It's too intense. It's too powerful. And it cannot shrink itself and limit itself and become articulated and contracted and defined within the structure of the letter. And where does it exist? It's there. But it exists in the makif. It exists in the encircling energy around the letter. When you look at it, it may seem blank, empty. But that blankness contains within itself a light that is even more powerful in some ways than the light that's articulated within the actual letters. Now, every single Jew is a mirror of the Torah. Every Jew originates in the Torah. Every Jewish soul is deeply linked with Torah. The very name for Israel, Yisrael, is the acronym as the Megala Amukas, the famous Kabbalist Rabbi Nathan Shapiro, who died in Krakow, the rabbi in Krakow in 1640. And in his monumental, brilliant work, Megala Amukas, he says, Yisrael, the word Yisrael, Israel is an acronym. Yesh Shishim Riboy Oisis LaTorah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. Why? Because each letter of the Torah corresponds to a Jewish soul. There are 600,000 generic Jewish souls. Each letter is connected to one soul. Of course, many souls can be connected to one letter. I'm not now getting into the discussion that the fact that when you count the Torah scroll, you will see that there are less letters than 600,000, and that has been dealt with at length, but it's beyond the scope of our conversation tonight. Now let's go back to our story. The Jewish people were at Sinai. They entered into a covenant with God. God gave them the Torah. But 40 days later, when Moses was on the mountain, the Jewish people hurled the Torah out of their lives. They created a golden calf. Suddenly a new consciousness took over, a consciousness of frivolousness. No God, no law, no covenant, no relationship, no transcendence. Suddenly they're dancing around the golden calf that they made, and some are singing, Eile Lekecha Yisrael, this is your God, Israel, who took you out of Egypt. Imagine the transformation. Imagine the downfall. Moses comes down and watches it, and what does he do? He breaks the Torah, he breaks the tablets. The Meddra says, why did he break them? The Medrash Rabbah, one of the explanations is, he saw that the letters of the tablets flew away. He saw Parchu Isis, the letters flew away. There was merely stone, sapphire, granite, whatever it was. They were heavy. It was heavy. He broke them, he smashed them. At this stage, it seemed, the relationship between the Jewish people and Torah ended. And that's what God told Moses. God says, my promise, my vision, my dream for the Jewish nation has been obliterated. The hopes were great, but nothing materialized, nothing came true. And the connection between the Jew and the Torah seemed gone. In fact, if the Jew is connected to the letters of Torah, yes, Shishim Riba Yosis LaTorah, the letters of the tablets, the letters of the Ten Commandments flew away, they soared. They did not have a relationship anymore with the Jew. Now Moses comes back on the mountain and he beseeches God. And he tries to secure from God a new forgiveness and a new relationship. And demonstrates the point that the relationship is not over. How? How can you say the relationship is not over when the relationship seems to be over? The Jewish people consciously, or at least many of them, took the Torah and threw it away. They alienated themselves from the Torah completely. What happened now was Moses revealed a new dimension in the relationship of some Jews to Torah. Every Jew is organically connected to Torah. Some Jews are fortunate to be able to see their connection in a conscious way in the letters of the Torah. Every Jew has his or her letter. Sometimes you have the merit to be able to look at yourself and then to look at the Torah and see how the two mirror each other. You can consciously experience yourself in Torah and the Torah within yourself. But then there's another Jew. When you look at this Jew, you do not see in his or her conscious self a letter of the Torah. And when you look at the letters of the Torah, you do not see this Jew. Does it mean that this Jew is disconnected from Torah? No. What Moses revealed at this moment was that sometimes some Jews are organically connected, if not with the letters of the Torah, with the blank parchment around the letters of the Torah. If not with the pnimi of Torah, the conscious light of Torah, with the superconscious light of Torah. Sometimes you see a Jew and he or she looks alienated from Judaism, alienated from Torah. There's no way you're going to see in him or her a letter of the Torah, and there's no way you will see in the letters of the Torah his or her identity. Lest you think their relationship is over, lest you think there's no connection. That's not true. You must look into the white blank parchment of the Torah. You must go into a deeper place of Torah. Don't look into the consciousness of Torah. Look in the superconsciousness of Torah. Don't only gaze at the letters which articulate Torah in a defined way. You must go to the makif of Torah. You must go to a deeper, more intense, more invisible, more hidden place of Torah, into the Urn Mock, into the transcendental, encompassing energy expressed in the white parchment around the letters. And when you look at this Jew, you can't only look at the letters of this Jew. You can't only look at the conscious, projective personality of the Jew. You must have the courage and the wisdom and the depth to be able to look at the white parchment of this Jewish soul. To be able to go deeper than the black letters, to be able to see the white gevil, the muk of gevil, the Urn Mock, to be able to go to the sub-chambers of his heart, to be able to go to the transcendental, superconscious realms of his mind and his psyche. And there you will discover how his makif or her makif is organically entrenched in the Urn Mock of the Torah. You will discover how his or her transcendental, deeper, unconscious energy is deeply connected with the unconscious energy of Torah, expressed in the white and the blank parchment encircling every single letter. So the gevil, the white parchment, is a very important component of the Torah. Now, we'll understand the story. When Moses is on the mountain, he's writing the Torah. What is he writing it with? A quill. What's in the quill? Ink. And when he writes the Torah with the ink forms letters, oisios, which then form words, which then form verses, which then form portions, and so on and so forth, and you have a Torah. But then there was nishtayer d'moi b'kol masai. Then there was the ink that remained in the quill. It was left in the quill. It never made it onto the Torah. What does that represent? The withheld ink is too profound to be expressed on paper. It represents the gevil, the blank parchment of the Torah that doesn't have ink on it. The withheld ink is what authored the gevil of the Torah. The letters of the Torah were authored, were transcribed through the ink that left the quill and made it onto the parchment of the Torah. But then there's another type of ink. There's the ink that's held back. It cannot express itself in words. And with that ink that was held back, it remained in the quill. That's the ink with which God authored the white blank parchment around every letter, which does not have ink on it. This represents the core of the Torah. And in the Jew, it represents the core of his consciousness, the quintessence of our identity, too deep to be manifested in words and even in hints. It's the part which may be unknown, blank, white, even to yourself. Doesn't look like there's anything there. You look at a Jew. He doesn't feel anything. He or she claims they don't want to feel anything. He or she doesn't show up. They don't care. They seem completely alienated and estranged from Torah. What's the relationship between this Jew and Torah? There's no relationship. And I'm not just talking about other people. I'm talking about you and I. Maybe not you, but I. We each have moments when we go blank. We don't care. We don't feel. We don't appreciate. We're just not sensitive. What do you do at such a moment? You think you're lost. You think this Jew is lost. No. You just have to put on a different set of glasses. Now you have to take a look at the white parchment, and you will discover that this Jew or you exists in the white parchment, in the subconscious of his hearts of hearts, in the unarticulated white parchment of his soul. He is still deeply connected and one with Torah. He too is rooted in Jewish history, in Jewish consciousness, in Jewish faith. His psyche originates in the ink that was left behind in the divine quill, expressed in the expressionless white parchment of Torah. It may be too deep to be visible, but it's real. And it's expressed through the absence of expression, because it's too deep to be expressed in the containers and vessels that we create. And this is the secret of tshuva. What's tshuva? Tshuva, which means repentance, return, means to discover the place in yourself where you were never disconnected, to find yourself in the white blank parchment of the Torah, and to find the Torah in the white blank parchment of yourself, which existed even when you stumbled and failed and made mistakes, even when the mistakes are sometimes very severe and horrendous to the point where you smashed and crushed your own tablets and your letters flew away. But the connection with the Gevil, with the Makif, still remains. And it may be, my dear friends, that this is a deeper meaning in those inimitable words of Moses when God does not want to forgive the Jewish people. Bring up source number 3. Moses turns to God at some point in Parsha's Sisa and he says, Va'ata, and now, im tisachatasam, if you will tolerate their sin, great. V'im ayin, and if not, mecheni no misifrecha asher kasafta. Erase me, blot me out from the book which you have written. If you do not forgive the Jewish people, erase me, Moses, from the book which you have written. At the surface, it seems that Moses was simply telling God a message. It's either I go with them or you don't have me either. Don't think you're going to separate me from them. If you do not forgive them, if you do not tolerate their transgression, that's your choice. But I will not be part of your Torah. Erase me from the book which you have written. To the extent that the Baal HaTurim, one of the great biblical commentators, Rabbeinu Yaakov Baal HaTurim, I mentioned him earlier, the son of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, writes, and it's brought in other books, a fascinating thing. From the day Moses was born, there is not one portion in the Torah which does not mention his name numerous times. He is born in Shmos. From Shmos till the end of his Osa Bracha, every portion has Moses' name besides one. Which one? The one preceding Sisa, Va'ata Tetzava. Va'ata Tetzava, although many times it says you will not find the name Moshe there. Why? So the Baal HaTurim explains, because Moses told God, if you don't forgive the Jewish people, erase me from the book which you have written. Now, although God did forgive the Jewish people, but when a righteous person says something, even as a condition, it has an effect, it has an impact. And therefore, there's one portion from which Moses' name was deleted, the portion of Tetzava. The Morinayim and others say a Gavaldic thing. Usually we read Va'ata Tetzava during the time of Zion Adar, the 7th of Adar, the yahrzeit of Moses, the yahrzeit of Moshe. When he passed away, that's usually the time when we read the portion which does not have his name. So Moses is saying, either you forgive them, and if not, erase me from the book. But there is, I think, a deeper interpretation based on the above. What Moses was telling God is, if you forgive them, then you will be able to appreciate their relationship to Torah. If you forgive them, then it means you understand that they're still connected to the letters of the Torah. Good. Ve'im ayin, and if not, if you're not going to forgive them, why? Because you think the relationship is gone, it's over. Then what you have to do, then it's time to erase the letters from the book which you have written, because now you have to look at the parchment under the letters and at the parchment around the letters. Now it's time to erase not just my name, to erase me and all my letters from the Torah. Now you have to look at the parchment beyond the letters, because there you will find the connection and the relationship. Now we'll be able to understand a very interesting thing about the Jewish calendar. When did Moses come down with the second tablets? We know, the commentators explain, it was Yom Kippur, which is why it's the Day of Atonement. So when did Moses' face experience this great glow that everybody saw? On Yom Kippur, when he came down with the second tablets of stone, after God has completely forgiven the Jewish people. Now, we have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Then we have the holiday of Sukkot, the holiday of joy, which is culminated with Simchas Torah, the joy of Torah, when we complete the Torah and we dance with the Torah. And everybody asks the question, why isn't Simchas Torah on Shavuos? Shavuos is the holiday of giving of the Torah, so that should have been the time when we take the Torah and we dance with the Torah. That's the holiday of Torah. The answer, of course, is because the cycle of Torah reading begins on Simchas Torah and ends on Simchas Torah. And we dance with the Torah when we finish the Torah, granted, but the question is, why didn't they institute a cycle of reading to begin on Shavuos and end on Shavuos, which is the holiday of Torah? That's the day the Torah was given. Start reading the Torah and finish it then and dance with the Torah. No, it was given on Shavuos, it was given, but the dancing with Torah is on Simchas Torah, a different holiday. Why? And one of the best answers given for this was, the dancing of the Torah, we're celebrating the second tablets that were given. On Shavuos, the first tablets were given to Moses. Shavuos is the time God came down at Sinai, gave him the 10 Commandments. Moses was there 40 days and 40 nights, and he came down with the first tablets, but he broke those tablets. And then he went up back on the mountain, and he beseeched God for forgiveness, and God forgave him, and he got the second tablets, and he came down on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we now experience the power of tshuva, of repentance, of rejuvenation, of return, of renewal. And Simchas Torah is the joy of Yom Kippur. It's the joy, it's a celebration of the healing that came after alienation, of recovery that came after addiction, of a renewal that comes after a breakdown of the relationship, after the betrayal. And yet, even after the betrayal, you realize that hope was not lost, that the connection is still there in a very potent and powerful way. It may not be in the letters, but it's in the white parchment around the letters. That's the celebration of the dancing of the Torah and Simchas Torah. It's not just dancing for the Torah which we have given, which we were given on Shavuos. It's the dancing of the recognition of the essential, unbreachable, and unbreakable connection and relationship between every single Jew and the Torah. Now look at this. What do we do on Simchas Torah? We don't open the Torah and dance and just learn the Torah inside. What are the hakafas? The Torah is sealed. It's rolled up. It's in its cover. And we take the Torah from the outside and we dance with it. In other words, we're not just opening the Torah and reading the letters, because Simchas Torah is not about the letters. Simchas Torah is about the parchment which is around the letters. So therefore, we don't just read the Torah from inside, then you only have a relationship to the letters. We hold the entire Torah. We hold the Torah, the parchment of the Torah, the Urn Mock of the Torah, and that's what we're dancing with. And how do we dance? We dance in a system known as hakafas, which means makif, surrounding, a circumference, lahakif. Why? Because we go around and around the bima with the Torah. What's the significance of this? Because Simchas Torah was celebrating the Urn Mock, the encompassing energy, the energy that surrounds the letters. Not the letters, but the muk of gevil, the white parchment, the blank parchment surrounding the letters, the hakafas of Torah. And we celebrate it through surrounding and going around the bima in the synagogue. And when do we do it? After we finish reading the Torah. At the end of the Torah in Ha'azinu, God says, Moses says, Kisvu lechem es hashira hazois. It's time to write down the song. And it says in Vayelech, the next Parsha, it says in Vayelech, Moses writes the Torah. In Ha'azinu, he says, write down the song. And this is how the Torah ends, and then Moshe passes on. So we finish reading the Torah, we're writing the Torah. We're writing it not only on parchment, but we're writing it in our heart. The verse says, write it on the tablet of your heart. And then when you finish writing the Torah with letters, now you finish reading it, now comes Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, you get to experience that which cannot be written, that which cannot be transcribed, that which cannot be articulated in letters. Now you get to experience the transcendental core light and energy, which comes from a superconscious place in the Torah and comes from a superconscious place in yourself. Now come back with me to the Medrash, and let's see how we can understand the Medrash. Bring up again source number 2. From where did Moses get the glory? The answer is he was writing with the quill, Nishtayir Keema. Some ink was left in the quill and he put it on his head, and this is where he got the glow from. What was bothering the Medrash is why now after the second tablets? Why not the first tablets? On this the Medrash says, because when Moses came down with the first tablets, the Jews were tzaddikim. The Jews were holy, righteous people, so you did not have this glow. But now, after they broke the relationship, after the tablets were smashed, after they created the golden calf, now Moses discovered the ink that remained in the quill, the ink that was left in the quill, the ink that's not articulated in the Torah, rather that which is expressed in the absence of ink, in the white parchment which surrounds the letter. That's the light of tshuva, the light of repentance, the light of renewal, the light of a relationship that's never broken, that in the depth of your consciousness there is a wholesomeness and a holiness and a faith and a beauty and a love that nobody can ever take away from you. On this the Talmud says, bring up source number 4. The name of Rabbi the place where righteous people, the place where people who repent stand, the most complete righteous people could never stand. Why? Because the righteous Jew gets in touch with the letter of his soul, with the letter of the Torah. But the Baal Tshuva must reach into the white parchment of the Torah and must reach into a deeper place within himself or herself to be able to discover that core quintessential self which always remained one with God. And therefore the light that comes from that is a deeper light. It's a transcendental light. It's an essential light. It's a superconscious light. When Moses discovered that ink and put it on his head, from this he got the karni ahidi, he got the new rays, the new glory, the new radiance that comes not from the letters of the Torah, not from the ink, but he got it from the ink that was held back, the ink that was withheld in the quill. This is the ink that's expressed in the expressionless white parchment of the Torah. In the Urn Mock, it's a new light, it's a new gray. And this is why the joy of Simchas Torah is deeper than the joy a whole year. Why? Because that's when you get in touch with the extra ray, the new light, the new glory that Moses experienced as a result of the withheld ink in the quill. And it could be experienced not through words and not through lectures and not through teachings, but through dancing. Because the superconscious of yourself, you don't talk about, you don't lecture about it, you don't pontificate about it, you have to dance it. it encompasses you completely, and it's sometimes expressed in the legs far more than in the mind. This is the great light that Moses came down with. I think now we can understand and answer to the great question of the Erechayim. How does the Torah introduce the light? The Torah doesn't say Moses came down with the tablets and his face was glowing and he didn't know about it. No. The Torah says Moses came down with the tablets and he did not know that his light was aglow. When we say that Moses didn't know about it, it's part of describing the experience. Because this is a type of glow that comes from a place of Loyola. It comes from a place that's beyond das, that's beyond knowledge. We're coming from Purim. Purim, we know the Talmud says, Chayev inish l'psuma b'Purim ad Loyod. Gemara Megillah Daf Zayin, you have to get drunk on Purim until you don't know. You don't know the difference between cursed Haman and Baruch Mordechai. What do you mean you don't know the difference? So why are we celebrating Purim if we don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai? If Mordechai is such a great saint, so don't celebrate Purim. Why are you celebrating his defeat? The answer is, Adalayada ben Haman Baruch Mordechai means that you reach a place in yourself with a distinction between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai, is Loyada, that's beyond your rational conscious intelligence. It comes from the deepest place in your consciousness and identity. It comes from Adalayada, from a place that's beyond your rational, assimilated, shrinked, and constricted intelligence that trickles down from the subconscious into the conscious. And in the place of Loyada, then by every person there's a distinction between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. Moses came down with the second tablets. The second tablets were the tablets of Tshuva. So the Torah doesn't just say his face was aglow. The Torah says he wasn't aware that his face was aglow, because this is the type of glow it was. A glow that comes from a place of Lo Yoda, a place from your subconscious which you don't know. You're not consciously aware of it. That is what Moses revealed in the Jewish people. That is what Moses revealed in the Torah. That is what Moses, so to speak, revealed in God. And that's what became revealed in Moses' life. It's interesting, I saw another interpretation that's very much consistent with this in a book called Chanukas HaTorah from the 19th century, a great scholar in Europe. And he says that the ink that was withheld in the quill is referring to the fact that Moses' name was not written in the portion of Sava, as I explained earlier. So since his name was not written in the portion, because he said, erase me from the book which you have written, so that ink of his name was withheld in the quill. And in the merit of that, of sacrificing himself for the Jewish people, he merited this glow. So Moses sacrificed himself for the Jewish people, and he said, erase me from the book which you have written, and that's why his name got erased from the portion of Ata Tetzava. And that's the ink that gave him this glow. It was the sacrifice of the Moses for the Jew. That's what one of the books writes, the Chanukas HaTorah. And this is, of course, reflective of what we have been explaining, because why did Moses sacrifice himself for the Jewish people who were in such a lowly state? Because Moses appreciated Vos Ayid. Moses understood you can't only look at a Jew from the letter perspective, you have to be able to look at a Jew from the Gvil, from the white parchment perspective. He understood that the Jewish soul originates and is entrenched in the white parchment. And this is what you have to see, this is what you have to articulate. And therefore he understood what a Jew is, and what is the powerful relationship between the Jew and Torah and the Jew and God, and therefore Moses sacrificed himself for the Jewish people. I want to conclude the class with a beautiful episode that occurred in 1980. The great scholar and rabbi, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan Theological Seminary, rabbi in Boston, and one of the great voices of orthodoxy in the last generation was Rabbi Yosef Doiv Halevi Soloveitchik, Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosheber. And in 1980, in honor of the 30th anniversary of leadership of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, on the 10th of Shvat, Tavshin Mem, Rabbi Yosheber Soloveitchik made his way down to 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, where the Lubavitcher Rebbe was holding a public, large Hasidic Farbrengen gathering to honor the 30th anniversary of the passing of his father-in-law, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneers, and the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, the 30th anniversary of the Rebbe's own leadership. Rabbi Soloveitchik met the Rebbe there. They greeted each other very warmly, and Rabbi Soloveitchik sat, I believe, for close to 2 hours as the Rebbe spoke and expounded on various ideas of Torah and Judaism and their application to contemporary life. When Rabbi Soloveitchik, when the Rebbe came in to the 770, so it was lots and lots of people. It was packed. You could see in the pictures that are being displayed on the screen, it was packed. And they had a chair for Rabbi Soloveitchik, but it took a little time until they got the chair in place so Rabbi Soloveitchik can sit down. And those of us who were there remember how the Rebbe stood and would not sit down until Rabbi Yosheber Soloveitchik found his seat. And of course, the entire crowd remained standing. When Rabbi Soloveitchik left, and he stood up to leave, the Rebbe, as he saw that he was leaving, also almost jumped up from his chair and remained standing until Rabbi Yosheber left the shul, left the synagogue. But I want to now tell you an episode about this. The next day, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Shem Tov went to visit Rabbi Soloveitchik, and he shared the story with me. And he asked Rabbi Soloveitchik about his impressions or feelings last night when he was sitting near the Lubavitcher Rebbe at this gathering on the 10th of Shvat, 1980. After some other things Rabbi Soloveitchik told him, he communicated the following idea. He said, I want to ask you a question. Why is it that Koran Orpnei Moshe, that Moses' face began radiating with a glow only after he came down with the second tablets? Why was that glow not present on his face when he descended Mount Sinai with the first tablets? Rabbi Yosheber Soloveitchik asked. And he offered the following explanation, which of course reflects in one way or another the theme and the message we have been conveying throughout our class this evening. And he said, I'll explain to you the difference. What was Moses doing on the mountain during the first 40 days and 40 nights before the Jews created the golden calf? What was he doing? He was sitting and learning the Torah from God himself. Moses was the ultimate student who merited to learn Torah from the creator of Torah, from the author of Torah himself. For 40 days and 40 nights, Moshe Rabbeinu absorbed the untold layers of depth and width and breadth of Torah wisdom and Torah perspective on all of the 613 mitzvahs. The esoteric Torah and the exoteric Torah, the revealed part and the mystical part, the concrete part and the metaphysical part, the entire endless body of Torah literature, the written Torah and the oral Torah, Moses absorbed during those 40 days and 40 nights. When he was coming down from the mountain with the tablets of stone, Moses was coming down as the ultimate Rosh Yeshiva, the greatest Rosh Yeshiva who ever lived, the man who learned Torah from God himself, and now he would become the great communicator and transmitter of Torah teachings to hundreds of thousands and millions of Jewish students. That was the first set of 40 days on the mountain. What happened during the next set of 40 days and 40 nights? Here Rabbi Yosheber said Moses was not on the mountain as a student learning Torah, as a Rosh Yeshiva who would become the greatest Torah teacher in civilization. No. What was God doing now on the mountain? What was Moses doing now on the mountain? He was fighting. He was quarreling, so to speak, with the Rabbeinu Shalom, with the master of the universe. He was giving him an ultimatum. He was giving him an ultimatum. He was praying. He was screaming. He was beseeching. He was revolutionizing the landscape of heaven when he told him, if you don't forgive them, erase me from the book which you have written. Moses held on, so to speak, to God and would not let go until God says, Salachti kidvarech. I have, as we say on Yom Kippur, I have forgiven the Jewish people. Moses would not leave go until God says, okay, let's restart the relationship with a new vigor and a new vitality. Here Moses was not a student learning and he was not preparing for his role as a teacher. Here Moses was not a Rosh Yeshiva. Here Rabbi Yoshe Ber said Moshe Rabbeinu became a Rebbe. The first 40 days Moshe Rabbeinu was the ultimate Rosh Yeshiva. Learning, ready to teach. The second 40 days Moshe became a Rebbe who's ready to sacrifice himself and put himself aside to save, lift up, and rescue Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, ready to stand up, so to speak, to the Rabbeinu Shalom himself. That's the difference. When he came down the second time with the second tablets, Koran Pnei Moshe, now there was a unique radiance on Moses' face. This is the glow that is reserved for that person in the generation who suspends everything and sacrifices his entire being, his physical being and his spiritual being, for the Jewish people. And Rabbi Yoshe Ber concluded, he said, I want to tell you something. I remember the Rebbe back in Berlin. Back in Berlin in the early 30s, they both studied in Berlin. They befriended each other. And parenthetically, and I say this now parenthetically, Reb Shalom Ber Kavalsky, Olav Shalom, once related this story. Somebody told me, he heard it from his mouth, that in 1964 in Tishrei, Tavshin Chafei, the Rebbe lost his mother, and Rabbi Soloveitchik finished a lecture in the Y in Manhattan, and he brought Rabbi Kavalsky, Shalom Ber Kavalsky, who was close with Rabbi Soloveitchik, brought Rabbi Yoshe Ber for a Shiva call for Nicham Avelim by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he was there in the Rebbe's house, the Rebbe's mother's house on President Street in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and spent there some time. On the way home, Rabbi Kavalsky said, Rabbi Soloveitchik told me, he says, wir seien alle gewesen zusammen in Berlin. We were all together in Berlin. And he meant himself and the Lubavitcher Rebbe and other people who became great personalities later on. And he said, but is the einzige, was is a rein und a reus a reiner. He's the only one who went in and came out exactly the same way. Rein, pure, referring to from a perspective of religion, of perspective. Because Berlin in the 1930s, the onslaught against religion was unbelievably powerful. So even those who were great Jews had to be affected. He said he was the only one as geblieben rein. So now back to our story. Rabbi Yoshe Ber tells Rabbi Shem Tov, he says, I remember in Berlin, a great mind, a genius, a great scholar, a real Talmud Chacham, a real Rosh Yeshiva. I saw the Rebbe in New York in the 1940s, a great mind, a great Rosh Yeshiva, a brilliant Torah scholar and communicator. But last night, as I was sitting in 770 Eastern Parkway at the 30th anniversary of the Rebbe's leadership, and I looked at the Rebbe, last night I saw Ki Koran Pnei Moshe. I saw the glow that's reserved for that Jew who suspends himself completely for the sake of the Jewish people. Have a good night.